go ahead and do the roll call, please.
Yes, Eric Davidson is absent. Donovan?
Here.
Fleetwood?
Here.
Huffman? Here. Cortice?
Here.
Liquist?
Here.
Darwin?
Present.
And I believe board members Sadhu and Hawkinson are currently absent. Thank you.
Okay.
Lockbox here.
Sorry about that, Jen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Eric, I think we're going to start with you and telling us all about Kathy's 25 years of service.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome. Today we get to celebrate transit operator Kathy Holland for 25 years of service to our community as a transit operator at WTA. Kathy started back in August of 1998. We did miss the opportunity to celebrate her because we had this special meeting, so we delayed it to this month. Kathy has been a longtime fixed route transit operator. That's how she started. She did elect to cross-train into paratransit, however, and was a paratransit operator for a short amount of time. And more recently, and the reason that she's not here right now is because she is one of our hop drivers up in Linden. And so she is out and wanted to serve the community this morning rather than be here and be recognized in person. So when you're out in Linden, you will see her driving around one of our cool little hop vans. Some of the things that Kathy has done here, it really focused around building WTA's brand to the community. She was 10, 12 years ago inspired to start decorating buses at the winter holiday time and just took that on her own. Volunteer time came in our off time to throw up some snowflakes and put music and the sand, like snowflakes, snowmen and such in the back of the buses. Did that for both fixed route and paratransit buses. And that became a tradition that she's continued. And then out of that also came the Halloween bus decoration, which has become really popular in service. She will decorate the bus with a bunch of volunteers, and then we'll take it downtown for the downtown trick-or-treating time. I don't know what they call it, the Downtown Business Association trick-or-treat. And hundreds and hundreds of kids will line up on the plaza to go in through the bus. And this last year it was a pretty cool ghost pirate theme. She's also done a lot to support her fellow union members as a shop steward. She's been a driver mentor for new transit operators, and she's been a sub expediter. I wish she was here so we could shake a hand and see her in person, but she's a wonderful example of a transit operator for WTA. I'm happy to celebrate her 25 years this morning. So, in absentia, clap for Kathy.
Thank you, Eric, for that. Hey, and I remember, that's right. I know in the past, we used to have kind of a pinning ceremony if you were given a 25-year service pin or whatever it is. Do they still get that kind of pin?
They get the pin. Sometimes we'll do it here when they're in person, but if they're not, their supervisor will make sure that they get it and they can wear it proudly on their coat, vest, shirt.
Nice. Okay, thank you for that. Citizen communications. Is there any communications that we don't know about that we've already received?
Did we get anything last night?
No, we didn't.
And is there any member of the public who's here right now who would like to take a minute or two to address the board? If so, unmute or somehow be virtually recognized. Okay, hearing none, we'll now go on to a public hearing. This is a public hearing. I don't think it'll be too controversial. It has to do with modification of fare rates and rules to accept the free on fixed route cards, work on all regional fixed routes. We received a document which shows basically, I think it was just one line changed in our fare policy. Audra, would you like to begin to say more than I'd said?
Sure. Just a short background. In September 2020, the Board of Directors approved an interlocal agreement between WTA and Skagit Transit to create a regional system. Currently, paratransit eligible riders who utilize fixed route get a free on fixed route card, but they have been required to pay $1 on the 80 or 90X. Skagit has already moved toward allowing free on fixed route cards from our system access on theirs. And so we are just making this a reciprocal regional agreement and asking the board to approve this change to our fare rates and rules. Any questions? Comments?
I think there are no questions, so I'll go ahead and officially open the public hearing. Any member of the public who's here may address the board on this topic. If you are here, you could unmute or try to be recognized virtually. Is there anyone who wishes to address the board on this topic? And Les, can you remind me what we received already?
Yeah, I was gonna say, Vicky, I don't think we received anything on word for Audra.
I have not.
No.
No written.
Okay, if there's no objection, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for discussion and possible action.
I move approval of modifications to the fare rates and rules to accept free on fixed route cards on all regional fixed routes.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Jen and Scott. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion to modify the fare rates for reciprocal free on fixed route, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We now move on to the consent agenda. This is consideration of approval of the routine expenditures for August 1st through 15th.
Move approval.
Second.
Second.
Thank you very much. Any discussion? That's a consent agenda. We don't discuss this. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. We go on to a board action now. This is approval of modification of the existing interlocal purchasing agreement with the Port of Everett to increase WTA's capacity to enter into job order contracts with Burton Construction. Again, this is an extension. Megan, is there more that we should know about this?
I don't know. So back in September 2021, the board approved us to enter into a piggybacking agreement with Burton Construction to basically provide job order contracting. So it's an alternate way for municipalities to do public works. And it's usually those small, limited public works that are less than $350,000. Washington State has some really quirky rules around this. So what we're just kind of erring on the side of caution with this board request. Port of Everett originally gave us $500,000 of their capacity. We have exceeded that already, and we have other projects that we would like to do between now and April under this contract. So Port of Everett has graciously given us an additional $1 million, which is over the general manager's approval authority for a modification. So we're just being safe and coming to the board with this.
Thank you. So so this is a up to $1 million, but I assume all the expenses are actually budgeted. You already have budget authority as our executive general manager.
Correct.
But who we contract with for then becomes a general manager decision, and where we are increasing the contract, but also to a certain extent giving the general manager authority to exercise that.
Correct.
Yeah, if it's over 150, we still come back to you for approval of the ultimate construction contract.
Okay.
But this provides an alternate public works.
Thank you. Any further discussion or questions from the board?
A quick question. So does this interlocal give us like somehow advantage of Everett's purchasing power and gets us stuff at a lower cost?
Not necessarily. When contractors bid on these job order contracts, they provide what essentially is a markup of a unit price book. So this is just us not necessarily taking advantage of Port of Everett's purchasing authority, just kind of shortcutting the procurement process, which can be kind of lengthy and time consuming for staff. Does that answer your question, Todd?
Yeah, that saves us money then. So if it's saving staff time.
I guess the hope is the rates are at least competitive.
They are, yes.
Is there a motion on this? Yeah, go ahead.
Move approval.
Jen?
I'll second.
No pressure, no pressure. We have a motion for us to approve the modification of the existing interlocal agreement with regard to job order contracts. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That passes unanimously. Okay, so we've taken care of business. Now we turn our attention to the future. In particular, we're going to a report on the rapid transit study. Les, do you want to say anything, or should I go straight to Tim?
Just thank you to the board's patient and Tim and the Transpo group's patience. We had tried to have this on last month and I think the month before, and we just kept running out of time. So we built enough time for today to have a discussion. So thank you for your patience. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you. So yeah, this is the rapid transit study, the long-awaited presentation. Really excited about bringing this to the board today. Given it a lot of thought, given a lot of effort, the study. Purpose of the study, just to kind of reflect on that a bit, is to look at the feasibility of rapid transit or bus rapid transit in Bellingham. And so we've done that through a study. This has been about a 12 to 18-month process. We consider it kind of the phase one of a planning effort, recognizing that there's additional planning and future work that we need to do to address some of the issues and efforts that we undertook this year. It was primarily like a high-level technical study. We didn't develop any really firm costs or designs or anything like that, and that's further work. So this is basically just kind of reflect on whether it's possible to do this kind of system in Bellingham. And so we hope to do an engagement effort next year to refine some alternatives we discussed as part of the study, and you will see some costs for that come up in the budget for next year when you review the budget, so you have a chance to kind of weigh in on that. We do have a draft document for public review. So this is a copy of the document, but you can go to our Engage WTA site, which I'll pull up here in a minute.
Hey, Tim, is that your screen?
Yes.
Could you just click on the chat? I want to make sure that we're not missing anything. Okay, that's all it says?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
It must be.
That's okay. Sorry for interrupting.
Okay, well, doesn't seem to be activating, so I'll go ahead and stop that screen and try to get back to where I was.
But it's on our Engage WTA website.
Sorry about that. Okay, back to the presentation. So yeah, so today we're not seeking any board action at this time. We're going to be asking again for board approval for that budget item, and then further on there will be additional budget board actions. We would, however, welcome questions and comments you have today. And
I think it's also fair to say that if there's any concerns or board desires to redirect this effort, now would be a good time to speak up. Otherwise, you'll go ahead and proceed.
Absolutely. And then just finally, just want to acknowledge the good work of Transpo, our consultant team on this, Stephanie and John, and then the planning team also put a lot of effort into this as well. So the first thing I wanted to do is sort of address why bus rapid transit is being considered here. And I want to say that there have been a lot of questions about, why look at this type of service. And I would say that it's much different than your normal fixed route transit service. As listed here, it's considered to be more fast, reliable, and frequent. Obviously, you can add buses and increase frequency, but you can't necessarily gain reliability and having a shorter run times as you would on this kind of system. And I'll explain why that is in a minute. And you can do this through a variety of features, through transit treatments, like bus lane, signal priority for buses, and bus consolidation and enhanced design. And because the service is more robust and improvements are permanent, it gives sort of an indication to the development community that you have a permanent system here. And so you encourage that housing development to come in, and that's something you can't do as much with regular fixed route service. And then it helps people get to jobs much better because you have that reliability and you have the ability to
to get to your medical appointment, school, shopping, with less wait time on this kind of system. And studies have shown these particular benefits. One particular study that was recently done found increase on average of 35% in ridership on bus rapid transit systems. And it does vary quite a bit, but average was about 35%. So we know there are confirmed ridership benefits as well. And then finally, as we know the community is growing, we only have so much capacity on our street network. And this is one way to gain additional capacity. So there's only so much throughput, only so many cars that can operate on these streets, and the city is not planning on upgrading these streets to any large extent. And so we have to be able to move people around, and this is one way to gain capacity on our system. As far as the study need, I was hoping to bring up a little map showing increase in traffic over the next 20 years, but I'm not going to try to click that link because it doesn't seem to be working here. But I will say that it's been modeled that traffic will increase considerably. And so what that's going to do is it's going to increase wait times and decrease our reliability on our system. There will likely be a lot of variability in our schedules, and we're seeing that today. A lot of that's due obviously to construction, but we are seeing additional accidents and things like that. And so if somebody's waiting for a bus, it's going to be less reliable. They won't know if it's going to come on time, it's going to come 5 minutes late or 10 minutes later or later. So, buses will then tend to become less competitive with the automobile. So this study will address those kinds of concerns and be able to put in those sort of treatments that allow us to get through these intersections and reduce delays. And then just add one thing, that if folks are curious to see what the street capacity is going to look like in 20 years, the Whatcom Council of Governments did a way to go Whatcom, and that predicts out what those street networks are going to look like. And you can see all the predicted red from the congestion that's coming on that. Yeah. So just
and I was hoping to bring that up, but I don't know why
because you're trying to make it.
because everybody's staring at it. And then, I just have to say this particular project comes out of WTA 2040, which is approved by the board last year. And it does, I think this is the kind of system that hits best on our 3 pillars. You might recall that we identified equity, efficiency, and environment as those 3 key pillars and priorities for future service. And so in terms of equity, it really does attract the greatest range of types of riders just because of its frequency and it's serving as a background for the community. It also provides great amount of ridership, so that hits on the equity or the efficiency component, and then it has the greatest ability to provide mode shift because again, you're reducing wait times. People have a low tolerance for those wait times and delays, so you tend to attract people who maybe switch from driving a car to transit use. And then, finally, it does strengthen the overall backbone, and this hits upon not only improving service in Bellingham itself, but the entire network. So what we're able to do is potentially improve the small city rural service because now somebody coming into Bellingham, typically most riders from those outlying communities are coming into Bellingham, going to their job or school or a medical appointment. And now they're able to get on the system much more efficiently. They don't have to wait as long. And then we could potentially alter those routes to connect then, rather than a transit center connect to these particular lines. So we might be able to improve service and increase frequencies for those lines as well. So it really does have benefits throughout the system, not just to Bellingham itself. So with that, I want to turn it over to John Husing from Transpo, who's going to take us through the study findings, and then we're going to wrap up with next steps.
Okay. So is my camera working, everybody? I don't have myself on the screen here. Just want to make sure that you can hear me as well?
Can hear you fine.
Okay. So, to conduct the study, the format that we followed and the objectives kind of bore out of what the FTA small starts program. That's where this funding would be sought from. It funds rapid transit and BRT, an operational project. So we wanted to make sure that we conducted the study in that format. So that'll be why some of the reasons that you see why we did things the way we did, and I'll explain those. But our first thing is we established a tech advisory committee, to gather feedback, make sure that we had the right people in the room, the city, some of the bus operators, and working with that with the TAC, we looked at evaluating the two corridors which are the highest ridership, and those are usually ones you're looking at for bus rapid transit or bus rapid treatment. You want to keep and preserve your high yielding bus routes. So we looked at the gold line and what we call the blue green line, which is kind of for this study is we've made into one route. So the ones the reason we chose those again are the further ridership qualifications for the funding that have the most potential for ridership and where we're seeing congestion and where the travel time impacts are going to occur in the future. So next slide. So just to give you a point, time points here. So we've prepared the study. This is the checklist. Usually we go by. These are the steps through the FTA small starts process. So right now we've gotten to we're trying to get to the recommended locally preferred alternative. The study does not name one, but the study will, if you read the study, it does defer between which route is better. And then the next steps are, and at the end, I'll go through a detailed timeline. But right now, the next step is the engagement and outreach. How do others think about this project, and refining the locally preferred alternative before we bring it before the board. Is that right, Tim? I just asked Tim that because we kind of changed this a little bit.
Yeah, next year we have engagement. I think I heard your question, but next year we have engagement and then the locally preferred alternative decision.
Right. And then once we get to the FTA approval for project development, then that's usually where we submit the application FTA, and that's when they provide the funding for final design and construction of the project. Go ahead. So when you're thinking of rapid transit and bus rapid transit, there's a lot of things that can make it up. Some people believe that bus rapid transit is you have a transit lane or you have an exclusive right of way in the median and the bus goes up and down that and nobody else can use it. That is what we call a full rapid transit that would encompass most of these key elements here. However, we said, breaking that down, some projects, you never get to that level. There's, constraints. We already have a lot of constraints in the area with right-of-way streets, the city kind of taking a step with road dieting, which they're cutting some of the capacity on some of these roadways. So what we did is working with the TAC, can you go to the next slide, Tim? Is we said let's develop 3 tiers here. So as we go along, even if we hit blocks or barriers to implementing the full be a full BRT corridor, we still have projects that we can submit for funding. So maybe we never get to a full fixed guideway, which I'm sure there's not many of them get that far. But we're still able to have improvements and alternatives that that we can identify and submit for local spot improvements, where we have issues with hotspots or choke points at intersections. And then enhanced transit, which takes on, can we get TSP? Can we get maybe some transit lanes that aren't just bus lanes all day long? They're, maybe they're parking areas that are used in the morning for the bus. So we wanted to make sure, and this is in lessons learned and some of these that we've done and following others that have been done across the country. We thought was, especially for Bellingham, is the type of area where you want to, start at sometimes we say we should flip this pyramid, right? But you start locally, you start, with your enhancing, and then see how far you can get to this full BRT corridor. A lot of them just said full BRT, and they went through the environmental, they went through the ranking process, and the projects just weren't constructible. I'll leave it at that. Next slide, Tim. So with the TAC, we also worked out goals and evaluation measures, and this is just for the feasibility. This is to say, hey, is this appropriate, and is there a need for this in the WTA region, right? So the first we came up with is improve safety and comfort for both the riders and safety in terms of pedestrians and reducing conflicts with other modes. Next was, of course, provide more efficient transportation. And what we mean by that is, can we increase the transit speed and reduce the running times? Which corridor has the potentials for that? And then increase access to opportunity. Which lines increase in ridership? Which ones have the land use that can support new and expanded ridership? And we can actually do more non-motorized oriented design. And I don't mean to be, we can talk about what these are, but looking at, go ahead, Tim, you can go next. So what we do is, and these are very high level, is rapid transit feasible? I would say, given the density, this is from a land use perspective. When we first look at rapid transit in an area, it's like, what's the future density? And Tim already alluded to the traffic, which some areas become quite say red. In the future is, the minimum density is usually around, we look at a score of 17. The gold line here is 22 and the blue line is 26, which means to us is that those two areas are going to grow, and we're going to need to, there'll be a need for provided mobility, more mobility or better mobility, and also, just providing more capacity without expanding the roadway, because it's clear that nobody really wants to widen roadways in your area. So we think there's, just by looking at this, this usually triggers the need, okay, guys, we got something, there's a lot of stuff going on here. We're going to have things slowing down because of development and the density. So next thing, go ahead. So this is one thing we looked at. Then we did a summary, and the summary evaluation, this is a little different, but than most people see, like with a traffic study. But these are how well do the measures that were developed address the goals and objectives that were developed by the TAC. And as you can see here, the green blue line is very scores higher. It's not without its issues. The gold line has much more transit oriented, supportive land use in it. we believe that the green blue line, and they're very different. As everybody knows, the gold line is just a circuitous route, where the green blue line is a much more direct route, which is usually scores much higher on the ability to increase the transit speed and reduce run times. Go ahead. The other measure that we looked at was increase in ridership. Now this was prepared by Tim's team with the software they use, which is T-Best, which is a forecasting software that was developed by some researchers at Florida DOT, and it's a well-trusted one for doing these type of feasibility studies. Eventually, we'll have to use the FTA procedures, but as you can see, the increase in the boardings ridership with the rapid transit treatments for the green and blue corridors the increase is much higher than on the gold corridor. I mean, this is probably most due to that there is a major destination in the green and blue corridor line, which is the university, Western Washington University. And go ahead, Tim, go to the next one. And again, looking at where the traffic operation issues, where we're going to have a lot of traffic, where the buses are going to be stuck in traffic in the future, we've identified a lot of we call them hotspot locations, which are usually intersections, right? And the improvements, what we hope, and they usually do, such as transit signal priority, the queue jump lanes, the bat lanes, and the bus and bike lanes, that really helps the bus move more quickly, around the traffic, or gives it, priority over the traffic. The transit signal priority, what we've noticed with that across the board on most of the studies that we've done, if we put in a true corridor-based transit signal priority that's able to be in like a closed corridor. So the green line, all of the signals are coordinated. They're on this signal priority system, that we usually see that all traffic benefits from that. So, and we definitely are going to need that in the future, once you see the future plots that were discussed before. Go ahead, Tim. So, recommended corridor. Right now, the green blue corridor, it has the overall better score. It's much more direct, which means it's more intuitive for riders. It has a big destination. And when we say the green line portion has less potential ridership, even though it gains more ridership than the gold line, less means is that it doesn't really have the development potential, transit supportive land use development potential that the gold line has on what's being constructed along the gold line to date and what's planned. The gold corridor, I just said what I just said, is that it scores much higher on the transit supported land use. It contains Barclay Village and Bellis Fair Mall, but it's a circuitous route, which is usually really tough to introduce full BRT to, because the way when it's circuitous as it is, it's mainly a very, very local route. So that's its ding or disadvantage on this corridor. Go ahead. But that doesn't mean that the gold line can't be improved for some treatments. So like we said, the project timeline, so as we move forward, right? So we've done the study. It's completed. Well, I think we're gonna change the 2024, 2025 timeframe a little bit to probably, well, 2020, this still works. The environmental analysis here is more of a scan next year, and actually the engagement, not just with public, but engagement with all the different groups, stakeholders that we've met with in the TAC in the past is, as we go through, they're getting more of their input, is refining the steps and refining the LPA so we can present the LPA to the board, right, Tim? Then what happens is, if the board approves it, then we move forward. We get closer to 60% design, and we submit the small starts application. FTA is already aware of the project. We will involve them in the project development, because usually if they're involved and they like the project in the project development phase, usually the application is a success. So in sometime in 2026, 2027 is when we would expect to receive the money for the final design and the construction of, and there's not a lot of construction, because people think of construction, you're thinking of, digging up the roadway and stuff. But we've tried to maintain within the right of ways, and a lot of the design and a lot of the construction will be these systems, such as the transit signal priority, and other treatments that come up within the project. But and that's kind of the year we're also trying to make sure that we incorporate this in the Bellingham station construction and the design of that. Will the rapid lines need different type of boarding locations or boarding types in the station? So we're trying to make sure that we coordinate those two, the rapid with the design of the Bellingham station. And I think Tim, if you don't have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I'll just wrap up here. I just want to clarify a couple things. Just to clarify that FTA Small Starts funding, it provides 80% of the cost of a project. It's the most commonly used source of funding for these kinds of projects. Many of our transit agents in Washington State have used that source of funding. And so they do require you to go through this set process and show benefit from that kind of system. And so that's part of the work we're headed to. Whether or not we'll get there is a question mark. And that's the further work that we need to undertake next year through the planning phase. But I just want to make it really clear that in order to get to that phase, I think we would rely on that source of funding. And again, you have to meet the warrants. And if we didn't, then we're in a different mode. So that's kind of how we're trying to set up this project to enable us to go through that specific process with the FTA. But as far as next year, I think we see this project just overall as it could be phased in some ways. We could begin implementing certain portions that we think will benefit the system. It will take time to improve some systems to allow us to improve our operations, but we can phase it. So when we talk about a full BRT or we talk about enhanced service, we can start implementing some of those pieces without waiting for the full implementation. I know that was a question from the board before. Just to touch on, this slide doesn't really talk about it, but for next year, I did mention that doing additional engagement, we didn't do a whole lot of engagement as part of this particular phase because it was more of a technical study. Next year, we plan on reaching out to stakeholders and refining the alternatives that are shown here. And then, as John mentioned, developing a recommended locally preferred alternative. The board would either bless or not that locally preferred alternative, and that would allow us to kind of proceed. So there's more work to be done next year. So next year, we also would like to begin some additional service planning. One of the things we think there's opportunity to improve and make more efficient the Western service.
We will begin working with the city, identifying, again, working on these hotspots more specifically, and then with the comp plan updates, working in that arena as well to see if there's opportunities to better link the future transit network with land use policies and land use development. So we have quite a bit of work we'd like to do next year that is related to this particular project. So I think with that, I think anything else? We just have one thing just for background, that we're truly fortunate to have Tim leading this. Tim did this in Fort Collins for the first BRT. So he's been through this process, understands how to do it. And then through those contacts, has also been doing a lot of due diligence, talking with other communities around both Washington and Oregon that have implemented these recently and lessons learned on it. So all that is factoring into this as we're moving forward. But it is, in addition to Transpo's experience, we're fortunate to have Tim leading some of this experience.
Good to hear. Tim, anything else, or should we open up for discussion?
Just one last thing. You saw the term BAT. You probably didn't understand what that meant. That's called a business access and transit lane. It's where you have a specific lane that can be used for accessing businesses, or like basically turning into a business. But it's not a general purpose lane for traffic. And then it can also be used as a bus lane. So the bus can travel on that lane. But it allows us to balance the user needs in a corridor and allow that lane still to be used for businesses. So you're not cutting it off completely. So that's what it is. I can show an image if you're curious about what that looks like.
Thank you. Board members, can we go ahead and stop sharing the screen so we can see all the other board members who are here virtually? Todd, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I got a couple questions. I first I want to say that I have a way better understanding of what we were talking about after this presentation. But a couple questions. The ranking of the two, the scoring between the gold and the 232 or the green line. I assume those are like what the federal agencies are looking at that we're maybe going to get grant funding. Was one of the criteria not just like density of population in those areas, but equity issues in terms of the relative affluence of the areas that are being served? So that's one question, and I'll just do a second one. We have like a $28 million placeholder, but in the budget for this, is that like if we built the whole pyramid out, or is what we're talking about for the first and second pieces of that pyramid something that would be maybe less than the dollar amount that we've been kicking around? I'll just throw those two out. So yeah, was equity considered and the budget question?
I can go ahead and answer that, John, and maybe you can fill it in with additional information. So we're basically sharing with you the high level findings, but I'd recommend consulting the study itself, which does dive more deeply into sort of the criteria and the ranking that we used. But equity was one of the key characteristics. We looked at specifically our priority populations, low income, minority groups, zero vehicle households, and people with disabilities and seniors. So those are our 5 priority groups. So we looked at those particular groups in terms of the context of the study. And that did factor in to some degree, but I don't think it factored in necessarily to the ranking part. It was more about where we saw the potential for the system. I don't know, John, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, and we will get into the. Am I unmuted? Okay, sorry. As we move forward, we'll get into the equity in more detail in that environmental scan that I talked about. Right now, what we're doing is we haven't picked the LPA yet, and we also recommend that even if we have a locally preferred alternative, and it is the green line, that we carry both projects forward until we're ready to actually pick the LPA, and they've accepted the application, they being FTA, because the whole thing goes about alternatives, right? So a lot of times things fail because, like, guys, what's your alternative to the blue line? So we have one, and what I'm trying to say is that the equity will be looked at in both corridors as we move forward. So it can be a selection criteria, but we don't know enough about both corridors in terms of that yet until we meet with people and kind of start tweaking the routes and what these alternatives may look like.
Just one more point. What the data did show us is these two corridors are the highest concentrations of our priority populations anywhere in the county. So we feel pretty good about, you know, the need in terms of those priority populations. So yeah, we looked at that very closely, and a staff member in my office is able to kind of look at the maps and determine that, and that's Michael Harpool. So we've done a lot of work around that. So and you'll see some of that showing up in the service evaluation project as well. So,
And Todd's budget question about the placeholder budget number.
yes, and it is a placeholder number. I guess just to admit, I feel a little uncomfortable putting a number at this point, but we feel like we need to put something out there. The study did look at different components for the bus rapid transit and come up with some cost estimates. But again, those are really high level. It's really tough to pin down what the cost of improving an intersection would be for transit. They're also different, and they all take different types of improvements. And so it is just a placeholder. We will be refining that number over time and giving a better sense of what it's going to cost. And that's part of kind of when you get into the design work, you know, you can refine that's part of the purpose. Is to
So in WTA 2040, there were some big numbers for BRT. So Todd is asking, were those big numbers predicated on potentially the full corridor, or did those big numbers contemplate sort of this partial rapid transit approach?
The numbers we've used are predicated on a full bus rapid transit. The numbers within this study and WTA 2040 are both premised upon having infrastructure improvements, 60-foot articulated buses, higher frequencies, all those different components that we've talked about in the study, and not just a portion.
And we'll point out that the Smart Starts, 80% of that comes from the federal government. Small starts.
Other board questions? I have one, but is there somebody else here? Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
Couple. I guess I want to see ridership improve. I guess I worry that we're just going to do something everybody else has done, and I was hoping for some creative, innovative, something new, as opposed to bus rapid transit that somebody else has done and it worked for them, and the assumption it'll work for us. I guess I challenge the staff and all of us to think about ways to get more people out of their cars and onto the bus. One comment, and then the other the future density that was based on 2045, if I read the slide right. I guess I'd like to know what the current density is, and you know, just to know. I mean, that's 20 years away. Mm-hmm. And are we building for 20 years from now? Is that? I mean, if the current density can't support it, I guess how soon do we need it so that those density numbers support doing this project? Mm-hmm.
And if I could hop in on that, so that's in large part based on the COGS study of what it's going to look like. If we're presenting a full BRT, that's a 8 to 10 year process to get that going, and so we're not that far if you take a 20-year planning horizon. And part of, I think, our job is as staff is to connect the dots, to look around the corner and see what's coming at us. And as we look at things slowing down, City of Bellingham land uses, inability to widen roads, the projected infill, projected densities, projected populations that are coming, connecting those dots and trying to see what's coming. And then, as Tim mentioned, something like this benefits the entire county network, because if people can't get into Bellingham to hit those county seat related things, it's going to put pressure on other outlying areas. And so we're trying to connect the dots and look at ways of of getting out ahead of those things. So it's not oh gee, it's hitting us in the face. What are we going to do now? And it takes us years to do it.
If I recall, the threshold density was 17 people or jobs per, I forget what. And it showed that in the future, both routes would be well over that. I guess Scott's question is, how close are we to that threshold now, and when do we think we'll cross over? Hopefully it's not in 20 years. Hopefully the crossover occurs, sooner.
Yeah, I'm not able to answer that question directly, but I do know that we're moving in that direction, obviously, with the development of the urban villages. Berkeley has significant expansion plans, high density housing planned. Question about Dulles Fair Mall, you got to think that that's a good opportunity for future housing, as many malls are transitioning over time, and the density happening in the downtown environment and some of these other areas, that it will occur. But yeah, I'm not able to speak to how close to that mark we are. I think in terms of other factors, I think maybe as big of a factor for me is the issue around bus delays and things that we're encountering today. And so outside of just any discussion of bus rapid transit, we're going to have to make some infrastructure improvements in order to keep buses on time. That's just inevitable. Otherwise, it doesn't make a lot of sense to go to higher frequency if we're sitting in traffic and bunching a bunch of buses. So that's a key point, that this enables us to then work on those particular issues.
Seth, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I just would say that all of the cues signal increased density is coming, both existing policy in Bellingham, state mandates that are coming. Our comp plan update is surely going to concentrate on how we manage density. And I think this is completely consistent with that. So I just want to express my support and enthusiasm for this effort. I think it's really good work. It's timely, and it's exciting to slowly see the future come into focus. So I'm fully supportive of what we're doing on this one. Thank you.
Other comments or questions from the board? I'll go ahead and take a turn. One of the biggest observations I had is that the GO routes, when they started, initially had an enormous advantage in terms of their speed and their reliability, not just their frequency. And that advantage is eroding. And we, at one point, I think it was 2005, we had like the most rapid growth of any transit agency in the country. And I think that was due to the GO lines, the advantage that they presented. I think we need to get back to that advantage. And I think if and when we do, we will see another bump in ridership. So I see this as sort of a way of creating a rebirth of the GO lines. And that's why I'm very supportive of it. I would want to ask this question, probably of you, John. We evaluated these existing GO lines and their routes. And as you noted, one of the routes is very circuitous. It seems to me that it'd be nice if we could model alternative GO line routes, right? Slightly changed routes to see if we can kind of optimize the benefits or the ease. We chose these routes based on, for good reasons, based on current needs. But if we reprioritize how we design the routes with BRT in mind, would we get different routes, and would those different routes score better in the evaluation process? So what about modeling changes to the routes themselves?
That's a good point, and that will be part of the not alternatives analysis, but that'll be, we call it environmental scan, but it's looking at, okay, well, can the blue line be improved, or are we seeing something as we're doing the analysis, like if we move over to this street, we can save 10 minutes, so why are we staying where we're at? Okay, well, and then there's all kinds of factors there. Did we place riders? So this is the base, I think, to determine the feasibility and to be able to tell FTA, hey guys, we have a project and we believe it's going to rank. How the project may look different when we're done with like 30%, 60% design. It may be very well on different streets, but we have we have to really get into it. Like Tim was saying, this is like a 10,000-foot scan. You know, is it feasible and is there a need? And I think what the study is saying is yes. How it ends up, we will be looking at everything when we do go through the after we go through the engagement and we refine the routes. You know, these things usually come up, and then there's alternatives for us that we have to go back and look at. I don't know if
Thank you, John. So,
Yeah, I mean-
Todd, I'm gonna recognize you, but I'm wondering, Holly, Allie, Dan, if some of you have thoughts, I'd like to hear them too. Todd, go ahead.
Yeah, so the go lines, I mean, the idea is they'd be every 15 minutes. Are we, because I think from this presentation I'm hearing, you know, we'd be trying to get something to be reliably every 10 minutes. So I'm trying, in terms of how much this proposal be an improvement over like the current go lines, are we close to making the 15 minutes regularly?
Todd, if I can answer that, we're at 15 minutes today on the go lines. So the go lines are 15 minutes during a typical weekday. Just to clarify, it's not quite as simple as that. However, where we have service to Western, which during the school year is typically every 6 to 10 minutes today, because we have a lot of routes going through campus. So technically speaking, I think in purpose of this study, that service would probably maintain about the same level. The go line, we would increase it to 10 minutes, most likely, if that was the selected alternative. And then the green line as well, we would increase the service there. So those are, maybe you see those slight, but I think it's a significant change to go to 10 minutes because the wait time is significantly less. So if you think about waiting for a bus, maybe it's 5 minutes. You're waiting on an average time basis, which, and you don't need, and more fundamentally, you don't need to schedule, right? You just show up at a bus stop. And we've seen that in other communities where you get to the bus stop, they don't need a schedule because they can reliably wait for the bus. Rather than 15 minutes is a little bit over that threshold, in my opinion.
Any other board members?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, so there's a 35 increase in ridership. I'm wondering what the overall, once it's done, what is there a projected overall increase to added costs?
Yes, I think the simple answer is we'll have to do some more refinement, but we have included some of those costs in our estimates. I had to go back and look at that, but it hasn't been refined yet. But there would be some cost increases. Primarily, I think with the gold go line, which would be that 10-minute service today through Western, as I mentioned, that we have every 6 to 10 minutes today. So there's probably not a substantial increase there. And then the other thing to look at is services that would change as a result that connect to those lines. So we would probably do some service changes in order to provide more efficient service. And we may have increases there as well. So,
okay. And then my second question was once it's established, so let's say we establish this in 2031 and everything's going and we're good. How easy is it to change something on that if we see in the next 10 years after that there's another place that, you know, maybe need, how easy is it to change a BRT once it's established?
yeah, I mean, I think that's the point, that it's considered, you know, I think you saw a slide that says kind of rail on wheels. It typically is fairly fixed because you're making those improvements in that corridor. Doesn't mean you can't add areas to provide the same level of service, but that particular corridor is considered fixed. And I think there's good reason for that, and that is you're responding to the market, you're responding to development that's occurring in that particular corridor. So it tends to be seen as fixed, which is a good thing, I think, you know, in terms of the signal to developers. Yeah, you don't have to have as much parking because now you can rely on the service being in place long term.
Any other questions? If not, Tim, John, thank you very much for the presentation. Sorry it took a while to present. I'm excited by this work. Like I said, I think it's a way of reinventing the advantage that we created with the go lines in the first place. If there's nothing more on this, Then we'll go on. We have reports from the board. We are pretty much at our time limit. I hate to say it. We've already lost one board member because they had to go. We have both the performance report and the financial ratios to hear
Those
about.
were information only, and if board members have questions, we can.
So we have those written documents in the packet. Does board members have any questions on those two reports? If not, we'll consider those reports delivered and accepted. And is there any further business for the WTA Board of Directors? Okay, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.